Okay, and let's shed some light on the subject, shall we? Yeah, that looks pretty good. Hey, hi, how are you? So I thought in this video, what I would do is talk about, well, a few different safety terms that seem to be often confused. Interchange, sometimes even used inappropriately. So let's get started. Now, right off the hop though, please keep in mind if you already have an established set of terms along with definitions in your safety program.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. As long as everyone is on the same page and doing things correctly and you're getting positive results, then yeah, don't change. After all, if you go and change now, it might just cause confusion. So let's get into it. Now, number one, the very first one, is incident versus accident. Are they the same thing? And why can't we use them the same way? Well, it's very simple, actually. The idea is an accident that's something that's happened by chance, mishappenstance, if you will, out of the blue, and it just occurs. And the idea, though, is an incident is something that's happened due to a lack of planning or a lack of safeguards or something that has occurred that wasn't planned for when the work was being planned. So in short, at work, in the workplace, we don't have accidents, we have incidents. Because the work should have been planned appropriately, hazards should have been identified, assessed for risk, and then controls put in place so that risk is either eliminated or significantly reduced so that work continues safely. And this brings me to number two, and that of course is hazard versus risk versus consequence. Number two, once again, hazard versus risk versus consequence. And I've mentioned before, quite some time ago when I first started this channel, I asked a group of people that were working in the wood manufacturing industry, cabinet making, or cabinetry to be exact, what is the biggest risk that you saw when you were using a table saw? And they said, well, cutting their hands off or cutting themselves or cutting their fingers off and what have you.
That would be terrible.
Now, realistically, that answer is wrong. That's the worst case scenario, the greatest consequence. Now, one thing to note here, when, at least in Canada anyway, when we're looking at risk as far as health and safety goes, there is no standard definition for risk across the jurisdictions. Even within the jurisdictions, risk is often interspersed in different terms. So honestly, in Canada, and we don't have a standard term for risk. In fact, you can look it up. Other jurisdictions like WorkSafe BC, for instance, have made attempts, but they're still not quite there yet. I urge you, in fact, just to look it up if you want and look at the different terminology of risk across Canada. And those of you that are in different countries, do me a favor, let me know down below if you have concrete and standardized definitions for risk. But the idea is that a hazard is a situation, condition, or thing, and this is borrowing from the Alberta terminology, that poses a danger to people, or workers, or property. And the idea is that hazard is exactly that. Whereas risk is the probability or possibility that that hazard is going to manifest and cause harm to people or damage to property. So the terms aren't interchangeable. And what happens is a lot of times when people are doing an assessment or trying to assess hazards, they end up looking at consequences instead of hazards. So let's use an example of manual materials handling, okay? Using this example of lifting and moving things, boxes, lifting materials, moving furniture, whatever. A lot of people, when they're doing a hazard assessment, will say, oh, well, the greatest hazard here is getting a sore back, strained muscles. And actually, no, that's the consequence. That's the end result. The actual hazard is possibly things like lifting when you're in an awkward position, excessive force when lifting. Those are the hazards. And then, of course, the risk is the amount of times that you're exposed to those particular hazards while you're performing those manual materials handling tasks. So then, of course, the probability of the hazard manifesting goes up with the more times you're exposed to those hazards. Get the idea? Now, the third example here is one that's often used, interchanged, and often mistaken, and that's inspection versus safety walk versus walkabout. Now, an inspection should be a planned thing. It should be also recorded. And I've talked about it several times, and you can check out the description below this video for links to a lot of what I'm talking about in the different videos I've made on these subjects. But the idea is Inspections are a coordinated, planned process where the worksite elements are being looked at, the people, the environment, the equipment and machinery, and of course the materials the workers are using. All of these are being observed, and then those observations are recorded on a form or a checklist or in a formal report. And then that report is done, and the process of correcting the deficiencies or unsafe acts then takes place. Now, whereas the walkabout or the safety walk, well, these are fairly close. Those walkabout and safety walk are close to the same idea. The idea is that a safety walk would be done by a manager or a supervisor or a safety professional. Now, really and truthfully, once again, the two terms, safety walk or walkabout, can often be interchanged and interspersed. The idea is that either one of those folks, the safety professional or the manager supervisor, is doing an unplanned walk about the work site. And what they're doing is they're looking at the work processes and the workplace elements that are there. Well, it's just sort of like an informal inspection, shall we say. The person doing that walkabout is going to have a look at those workplace elements and then perform some sort of quality assurance, if you will. They're looking at the processes and procedures that are being used, and they're the ones that have been put in place for safe work. Now, usually nothing is recorded. However, once again, you may have to make notes or record something if you see an unsafe act or you have to correct something, especially if you're the safety professional and you're going to have to report upwards to a manager. I did a video about that, and you can look up here at this link if you want, where I talk about just that same thing, correcting unsafe acts and reporting upwards to the manager. Now, this next one is constantly confused. I should note that, once again, I've made several videos regarding some of the things I'm talking about, so there will be links in the description, and I encourage you to have a look. And once again, by all means, leave me some feedback, some comments. I appreciate every comment I get. Number 4, practice versus procedure versus policy versus process. I did a video, a couple of videos a while ago, and I talked about the difference between practice and procedure. I've talked about policy. I've recorded a video about policy. So let's break all of this down, shall we? Starting at the top, policy is a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by a government, party, business, or an individual. Now, a simple way to look at it is this: how your organization is going to carry out an action. In this case, we're talking about health and safety. So a health and safety policy is covered in a high-level, broad statement. The policy needs to drive and empower your safety program, whereas a process is a written set of guidelines that establishes a standard of performance for an activity. So, as an example, you might consider your incident management. Think of it as a cradle-to-grave process, a workflow of all the way from the initial reporting, all the way to the resolution of deficiencies through corrective actions and the monitoring of those actions. That whole thing becomes your incident management process. A practice, you can look at a practice as a written set of guidelines that establish a standard of performance for an activity. Let's look at, say, ladder use, for instance. Now, once you've established a standard of performance, say the need to inspect before and after use, then the notion of a pre- and post-use inspection becomes a safe work practice. And now, a procedure is a written step-by-step instruction of how to perform a task from beginning to end. So let's use the previous example with the ladders that I've just talked about. You could establish a safe work practice of pre- and post-use inspections by providing a step-by-step procedure so you can establish the predetermined standards of what a good inspection should be, of what a good inspection should look like. Finally, the last one, well, for this video anyway. Now, once again, if you are interested in more videos regarding safety terms and different colloquialisms, that's a big word, isn't it? Different safety terms used in the workplace, then do me a favor, leave me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Anyway, number 5, and this is my personal pet peeve. I even did a poll on it recently, and thank you for those of you that weighed in. And that's near miss versus close call. And honestly, realistically, I cannot handle the term near miss. I've used it every once in a while just because, well, most people are familiar with it, but I prefer the term close call. And the reason is near misses, well, they're a contradiction in terms, plain and simple. I want you to think about it. If you were to back up, cock your fist, throw a punch, and you nearly miss someone, I bet you'd hit them straight square in the face. Plain and simple. So a near miss is not truly a near miss if there's an incident that occurs and the impetus didn't cause any damage or injury, but if circumstances had been different, then realistically, it might have caused something. Well, that's a close call. Of course, once again, you can weigh in the comments and let me know. I appreciate it. I appreciate your thoughts. Now, as I've said very many times before, the best way that you can be assured of buy-in and effectiveness of your program is to pattern it after your local legislation. However, there's no reason that you can't expand and adopt definitions that work for your workplace and your workflow. Your health and safety management system, particularly your safety programs, should be tailored to your workplace, not borrowing from some cookie cutter solution. So yeah, that's it for now. Anyway, but please do me a favor. Let me know in the comments if you have other safety related terms or expressions or things like that. Let's see if I can get it right. Colloquialisms, if you will. Either that or things that are a contradiction in terms or mystifying or whatever. And maybe we can do a part 2 of this video. Or who knows, maybe we can even make it a short series. And okay, please do me a favor, an additional favor. Be a safety leader. Be an influencer. If you're going to talk the talk, then walk the walk and lead by example. When you're doing so, you're provoking safety and you're being a safety leader. Okay? Take care. Bye for now.